Brendan.
Oh, cool. Great. Burn it down.
I've been so busy this week. Work's been crazy. There she is.
I love that.
We haven't started.
No worries.
We haven't. We will.
Without our
We haven't
president.
started. We will in a minute.
The party don't start. She walk in.
Yeah, she has to start the meeting. Don't they? That rule.
But I'll tell Mary to make sure that those 4 seats are together.
Okay, that's great. I'm really looking forward to it.
You're right around.
Should be fun.
Yeah.
Just have to
And then
remember.
That's not.
And then plus the follow.
No, wrong one.
I'm going to call the special meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order on Thursday, February 8th, 2024 at 7:02 PM in the Aldermanic Chamber. The prayer will be offered by Legislative Manager Donna Graham, and the pledge will be led by Alderwoman Shoshana Kelly.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all of our fellow citizens, so help us God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My apologies for the delay. Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien. Alderwoman Timmons. Alderman Moran.
Present.
Alderman Thibodeau.
Here.
Alderman Gouvert.
Here.
Alderman Lopez. Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons.
Here.
Alderman Senate.
Here.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Tebow.
Here.
Alderman Clee.
Here.
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderwoman Kelly.
here.
President Wilshire.
I'm here.
You have 12 in attendance.
Thank you.
Quorum.
So tonight is a public hearing, and I will turn the meeting over to the chairman of the Budget Review Committee, Alderman Dowd.
Okay, this evening we have public hearing on 2 pieces of resolution. First is R-24-004, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $51,843.88 of the FY 2024 unanticipated revenue into Fund Number 7024, Opioid Abatement Expendable Trust Fund, and R-24-005, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $8,500,000 to fund additional costs for the building renovations at the Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable Elementary Schools. We will start with R-24-004. Is there anyone here from the city that's going to talk to that? Yes.
Good evening, Bobby Badley, Chief Public Health Official and Director for the City of Nashua's Division of Public Health and Community Services. The funds that we're looking to have transferred over into the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund are funds that have come from the litigations against the pharmaceutical companies and that have been awarded to the state. Nashua is one of 22 subdivisions that are receiving an appropriation of about 15% from the total amount that the state of New Hampshire receives. I have some information I'd like to share about some of the funding that has been received in the state of New Hampshire and how we are actually using these funds. So to date, based on the amounts received from McKesson, Cardinal Health, Amerisource, Johnson & Johnson, and Mellencroft. New Hampshire has received $51,384,959.71 from this. And then there are the 22 surrounding towns that have also received money as a result of this, and that's usually split the 15% amongst those subdivisions. And so $7,782,743.95 has been distributed to the subdivisions. And this $51,843.88 is what we are looking to appropriate into the opioid abatement account. And we use those funds to help prevent continued overdoses in our communities. We've been able to distribute awards to several of our partnering organizations in the amount of $112,037.88. We expect to continue to provide funding to our partnering organizations to continue with this abatement work. The opioid crisis that started in 2016 continues to impact our community in so much as overdoses, families have been impacted. As we talked about before, the homelessness has been impacted by overdoses as well. And so these funds in this account are used to help mitigate all of those issues, including allowing for us to have staffing capacity to address some of those. And so the appropriation of the funds into this account goes to preventing many of those issues that we're faced with in our community.
Thank you. Would somebody like to make the motion to, so we can get it on for discussion, to approve and forward to the full board? O'Brien isn't here tonight.
That's the public hearing. That's the budget.
That's budget.
Public
Oh,
hearing.
yeah. we're gonna-
Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. Step ahead. Keep that in mind for the budget. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Bagley? Yes, Melbourne, Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd, Chairman Dowd. One, I think your department should be commended on the way that you are utilizing the opiate abatement funds to support the community. And like just yesterday, we supported $50,000+ to the soup kitchen. It's COVID, but your department's finding needs and filling it with funds that are crucially needed in the community. But my question is, do you already have a plan on what to do with this unanticipated funds? Any like particular agency or program that you're looking to target, or that public health is looking to address specifically with the unanticipated funds?
So the the funds that are coming in with this round, we do plan to, at the mayor's opioid task force, which is now our substance misuse task force, there will be an announcement made at the meeting that's coming up on the third Tuesday of the month, to make an announcement to the partnering organizations to let them know that we've received another round of funding. Those organizations can apply. We have a small funding committee that will review applications that come in, as long as those applications address prevention for youth getting involved with opioids, working with individuals to support their accessing medically assisted treatment, housing, any type of barrier that will prevent them from being able to be successful in their routes to recovery. Organizations can apply for the funding. We try to make it as simple in the application as possible, because the goal with all of the funds that come into the state, we try to move these funds out as quickly as we can to address the issues. And so it depends on what the organizations are writing for, and as long as those applications that come in can demonstrate their impact on prevention of overdoses, prevention of death, prevention of use of opioids, those funds, those awards are considered for those organizations.
Great,
Any
thank you,
additional
Director.
questions? Anyone else, questions for Director Bagley? Yes, Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So I think this is great that you know, any money that we can get to deal with this problem, and I know that whatever money the city is getting, it's being devoted to this problem, but I have some questions. I don't know if you can answer them or not, but I know the city entered into an agreement with a law firm that was participating in litigation against the opioid, the companies, the drug companies that you know, the source of providing these addictive drugs. Is this the result of the city's participation in that lawsuit where we hired a law firm to represent us, or is this something different? Is this something that the state was involved in?
So I think there's two parts to that question. I'm going to try and answer it correctly. If not, then we can check in with Attorney Bolton to be sure. There was an overall suit made against the pharmaceutical companies by the state as a whole, and then Nashua was one of 22 subdivisions or other towns and cities that also sued. And so if you're asking if that law firm helped us with that, I believe that might be the case, but Attorney Bolton would be able to answer that more specifically as far as hiring an outside law firm to deal with Nashua's direct suit against the pharmaceutical companies.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Another
Yes,
question,
follow-up?
please. The state of New Hampshire has, in the past, you know, I'm thinking about the settlement involving Volkswagen, and I'm thinking of the tobacco litigation. The state has not used all the money it has received, you know, to deal with the problems you know, like the air pollution problem that, you know, the Volkswagen suit was about, you know, or the, you know, dealing with the tobacco problems that was all about. Do you know, in this case, is the state, whatever money the state is receiving from this litigation, is it all going towards the opioid problem, or is there any part of it going to the general fund? Do you know?
All of the funds that are coming into the state with regards to this opioid litigation are used specifically for opioid abatement. So I do serve on the Opioid Abatement Trust Commission appointed by the governor, and the funds are very specifically directed towards opioid abatement.
Good, that's good to hear. Thank you.
All set, Alderman Jen?
Yes, I am.
Anyone else? Second shot?
Thank you,
Alderman
Mr. Chairman.
Moran?
I just wanted to follow up on a question from Alderman Jetting, because I believe it was answered at the last Finance Committee in regards to the emergency overnight shelter or warming station being authorized for the Finance Committee, and the opiate abatement funds were used there. That separate from what the lawsuit funds that the state gets, the mayor had explained during that meeting that we joined as a party, and we are able to get funds directly without even going through the state, because somewhere, an attorney said, advised to join as a party. And that is separate from the funds that we receive from the state's participation in those lawsuits. I could be wrong, not an attorney, but I'm just trying to parrot what the mayor had stated.
Thank you.
All set? Thank you, Director Magley.
Thank you.
All right, now for the public hearing on R-24004, I'll now call for testimony in favor. Seeing none, I'll now call for testimony in opposition. Seeing none, testimony in favor once again. Seeing none, testimony in opposition again. Seeing none. I will now close the public hearing on Resolution R-24004 at 7:14 PM. The next item is R 24-005, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $8,500,000 to fund additional costs for the building renovations at the Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable Elementary Schools. So it'll be kind of unique in that I'm going to be giving the overview. So we have a presentation that you can follow on the monitors. First of all, when we do a project, we hate to have to come back for additional funds. In this instance, I'm going to explain why we're coming back and that we need these additional funds in order to finish the schools. If we don't have these funds, we can't complete the schools. The other thing I want to point out is we're doing the two schools at once for a number of reasons. One, they were both built at the same time. They're twins. And the fact that we had several $1 million of ESSER funds to do the HIVAC and energy saving portions of it. So I'm going to go through the presentation. When I get through the presentation, if people have questions, you can ask me. If they get more detail, I have the crew with me tonight. Okay, first thing is the funding for the initial project. When we did the initial costing of the project to get it done, it was determined that the ESSER funds needed was 17 million. Bond funds was 16 million. So the total cost of the two schools was 33 million. The city passed the bond with these numbers. The school department, we had at least an informal, if not a formal agreement that we would try to get 17 million ESSER funds. And the bond was passed 16 million by the Board of Aldermen. This initial funding covered the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price. Unknown unknowns. As we get into the project, the following came to light. One was the school department realized they only had $12.5 million of ESSER funds to put into this project. And you should have had a copy of the explanation from the school department on your desk, I think, right? And let's see. And this funding, this reduced funding to $28.5 million, which is not enough to finish the work.
We don't have that. Some do, some don't.
I think she has some extra copies. And the school district can explain how the ESSER funds were utilized, but the bottom line is that we're $4.5 million short of ESSER funds, which now has to be covered by addition to the bond. The project requires, the bond to complete this project requires $4.5 million to cover the ESSER fund shortfall, $2 million for both roofs replacements, and I'll be talking to that in a couple charts, and $2.5 million for required alternatives, and I'll explain those as well. Additional funding in this bond will be $8.5 million. Okay, there were a lot of unknowns, as I know the Joint Special understands that term now. An example of that, I won't list all of them, but an example of that is in the Birch Hill School when we were doing the ESSER work, and we dug up the lower floor to put in some of the piping that was required. It was built on ledge. So we had to jackhammer the ledge out to put the piping in and runs in. That was an additional cost that we hadn't anticipated. And there were others. So first thing is, another anticipated thing was we had, and listed as an alternative, which we anticipated having enough money to do put a new roof on both schools because they've been leaking. We had the roofing company come and do a boring, which you'll see in the next slide, and it was realized that there are two existing roofs on the schools already. One was put on when the school was originally built, and it was in place for about 21 years before the second roof was put in, and the second roof's been on it for 30 years. It's now beyond its supposed useful life. So we found that we can't, by code, put a third layer on top of the roof. For one thing, it'll be too much weight, and there are other reasons for the code. So we have to strip both schools' roofs entirely and then put a new roof on. So the cost of that is, that's the exact number, but it's $2 million. There's the borings that they took, and it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that they're different. The original roof was tar with gravel, an old style of roofing, and then it was overlaid by a new roof, and so now we have to strip all that off. So this is hard to read. I'll cover a few of these. The one thing that we've done in all of our school projects is when we use the gymnasium for temporary classrooms, it gets, you know, just beat up would be a good word. And when they take all of the walls and everything out of that room, the gym needs to be fixed up. We had put it as an alternative because originally it wasn't part of the concept of the project, but we thought we'd have enough left over at the project to do it. We don't. So the gyms are used by the schools every single day. The gym hasn't been touched in, since the school was built, pretty much, I guess, other than putting a new coating on the floor. And these are also used by Biddy basketball. Biddy basketball's been in a strain for 2 years now because the gyms were not able to be used because they were classrooms. And we've done this on all the elementary schools, New Searles, Charlotte Ave, a number of schools where we fix up the gym afterwards, and it's not only a benefit to the school, it's a benefit to the city athletics. Probably read it better here. There's some minor landscaping. We found that the sidewalks outside of the school were, had ADA issues, and we want to repair those so that it's much more compliant with ADA. The playground resurfacing at Birch Hill, that's in desperate need, and the school has asked if we could replace that. We also, when we were going through the school, initially, we found that the windows at the top of the stairs were in terrible condition, and they're the same at both schools. So this number would be to replace them at both schools. The classroom folding petitions in the special ed achievement classrooms are in terrible shape, and the school's asked to have those replaced. So that's on here. There's lockers, there's existing non-operational fin tubes that we tore out, which had no reason for leaving them there. One of the big ones is the bidirectional antenna system, BDA system. The fire department requires that. Now that Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable have walls and classrooms, the fire department's gonna have to come in and make sure they can communicate when they're in the school in case of a fire with their radios. So we have to do that study. It's a requirement of the fire department. That wasn't initially planned. There's a data rack that we had to lift because of asbestos abatement and then replace with a new floor underneath it. That was an unknown. Computer labs need supplemental cooling because of the new design. Speaker selection, change in product, that's a low dollar amount, but that's to increase the students being able to hear the announcements. Radon mitigation, that may or may not have to be spent. There's radon mitigation at Birch Hill right now in place. When we get done, we're gonna take readings. If the readings indicate we need a radon system, it'll be reactivated. It's already in place, but it'll be reactivated. If not, it's just gonna be left there. And then we have the construction manager's labor fee and all that, and basically the total amount is $3,745,132.01, plus contingencies and other things. That's the additional $4 million. One of the things I think I forgot was, one of the things the schools asked for is fencing between the playgrounds and the woods at both schools, so the teachers won't lose students into the woods. There's some fencing that's damaged, but they want a fence behind the playgrounds to assist in security. Questions? Alderman Cleen?
Thank you. I'm still trying to get through all the documents. I am confused. They're asking for not to exceed $16 million. You mentioned the shortfall of the ESSER funds of $4.5 million. Then you mentioned you need $2 million for both roof replacements, $2.5 million for the required alternatives, and you said additional funding is $8.5 million. Those numbers, before I said 8.5, equals $9 million. So
We
is
will-
it 9 million and then 8.5? Is that what you're,
Originally, it was 9 million. We've taken the cost down to get it to 8.5.
okay, so I guess where's the other 7.5 million? Is that for these alternative items that you've mentioned here?
The total amount is 8.5 million. 4.5 million is to replace the ESSER funds.
Right,
2 million for the roofs, that's 6.5.
but the resolution is asking not to exceed 16 million.
No,
It's
no.
8.5 million.
No.
It says, okay, am I just reading this
8.5.
wrong? Okay, I see this here. I'm
The
sorry, I
original
apologize.
bond was for 16.
For 16 million, you're asking for 8.5 above the
Additional.
16 million. Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Moran?
Thank you. You're gonna get it one of these days. Alderwoman Clee, same thing last night. Couldn't grasp my name.
I know.
I'm easily forgettable. I always make that joke. I just had a statement that it's very, very sad about how our schools are in such disrepair, that it's so expensive to fix them. But maybe through you to CFO Griffin or someone else from the school department, do we know what the interest rate would be on the bond, a rough estimate, and the actual cost of the bond efforts paid off, including interest?
I could say, but I'm gonna let John.
Good evening, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer Tax Collector. We've pro forma'd a 4% interest rate on this bond. We're not gonna sell this particular bond for probably 2 years. So to the extent we arrest the inflation and reduce the borrowing, that would be a good thing. As far as the need for the funds, it's pretty obvious what we need to do. But if anyone has any questions for the school, Mr. Donovan can certainly answer them. Thank you.
The bottom line is, if we don't have this money, we can't finish the schools, and that's a real problem. We just got the certificate of occupancy on phase 2, which is the first part of the school, and the students now are moving over from the other side of the school into the new area. So this, in February, we will start at some point. We're gonna start working on the other part of the school, which we need the money for. Any other questions? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So, I certainly understand, that we've discovered problems that we didn't know existed. And, I haven't had a chance to read the explanation as to what happened with ESSER. But I'm assuming when I read that, that question will be answered, but, that's, I guess this all falls into the category of it is what it is. And, we have to deal with it, but when you talked about, discovering that the roof has already got 2 layers, I know there's nothing we can do about it, but, I mean, why was that a surprise? I mean, don't we know what we've done to these buildings since they've been built?
I've had.
Wouldn't we have known that we've already put 2 roofs on there? I mean, why is that discovered by borings? Why wouldn't we know that already?
We should, and Mr. Smith and I have had the discussions about this. He now keeps drawings, records, and everything that goes on at all these schools, and we have that data. But that type of information wasn't available back in the day. They didn't keep the old drawings, they didn't keep what happened. And so we didn't know until they bored into the roof. Had we known, we would have costed it up front. But we can't hire somebody to evaluate the roof until we have the bond to do the, so we can pay them. Nobody works for free anymore. So it's unfortunate, but in the end, I think if you talk to the principals, and I'm sure one of the schools in your ward, they're extremely happy with the work that's going on, and the school is becoming much, much better. The other thing that we ended up doing was, and it was only a minor difference in cost, is the school board wanted to put in bullet-resistant glass on all the first floor windows because the access roads around them are very close, and that was done. We have done additional security things to make sure these schools are as secure as possible, and as energy efficient as possible. The energy savings will be immense. When we get done with the new roof now, we're gonna reevaluate to see if there's any possibility now with the taking the weight off the roof, if there's capability of doing solar. If we don't, we're gonna talk to the solar company and see if we can do ground units at both schools. And there's lots of room at both schools. So at some point, we'll be putting the solar in, but the main solar right now is when we get done with McCarthy, they'll be doing that whole roof, and that's our big job. Any other questions, Alderman Cleen?
Thank you. I just briefly read this, and I'd like to thank Alderman Sullivan for having asked these questions and so on. I appreciate that. From what I'm understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I have no problem with, and I understand we need to do all these things. We're here where we are, we can't just leave it unbuttoned, it's gotta happen. But just for the clarity of the public and so on, I'm reading this as that we had a finite amount of ESSER funds and we overpromised them to certain groups, and now we're at the bottom of the barrel and this is all we have left. Is that correct?
Basically. The ESSER program was, of course, during the pandemic, and it had more rules than Congress follows.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very difficult to manage,
I remember.
There were 3 sets of funds, and they all expired at different times. And I think you'll recall that on this project with the ESSER funds, that if we were expending ESSER funds after September of '24, because this project goes on until September of '25, that we needed to get permission to do that. And that's when I was having the meetings with Senator Hassan, Senator Sheen, and Senator Sheen being the chair of the Senate Educational Committee. Make a long story short, they had the extension now, but if we're replacing the $4.5 million with bond money, it's not gonna be an issue anymore, because we won't be spending that money in that year. So, but in fairness to the school department, it was a very complex system. You know, they were allocating it to different things, a lot of state mandated teaching positions that were funded by it, so it's complicated, and when all the numbers added up, they didn't have the 17 million. Yes?
Thank you. No, and I agree. After reading this, it's quite understandable. It says that certain percentage of the funds had to be allocated for certain items and so on. So I do understand the complication. And I remember when all the funds came, we were all scrambling as to how to interpret everything. So I'm not being critical, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't get perceived that we didn't get what we thought we were getting. We got what we thought we were getting, but based on definitions and so on, it kind of got overpromised in certain areas.
And we're still getting both schools completely renovated, and 12.5 million of that is being paid for by non-city funds.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other questions? Nope. All right. Switch glasses. There are no other questions. I'll open up to R 24-005. Testimony in favor? None. Testimony in opposition? None. Once again, testimony in favor? None. Testimony in opposition? None. In that case, I will close the public hearing on R 24-005 at 7:35 PM. I'll give, and if I could have a motion from someone, since Alderman O'Brien isn't here, to adjourn. Alderman Kelly?
Move to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We adjourn at 7:35. Budget will follow in 5 minutes. Anybody that doesn't want to stay, please.
Do you need a clerk? Stay.
You're on budget here.
What's that?
No, I'm not. Oh, yeah.
Ugh. Oh, it's amazingly dry. When I was in Aruba last week, the humidity was 83%. All right, I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's Thursday, February 8th, 2024, at 7:38 PM. And we're in the Aldermatic Chamber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Dowd,
Present.
Alderman O'Brien, Alderman Wilshire,
Here.
Alderwoman Kelly,
Here.
Alderman Senate,
Here.
Alderman Tebow,
Here.
Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum. Roll call. Is there any public comment? See, no one. Communications,
None.
unfinished business,
There are none.
new business resolutions. First is R 24-004, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $51,843.88 of FY 2024 unanticipated revenue into Fund Number 7024 Opioid Abatement Expendable Trust Fund. Would somebody like to make a motion to Alderman Kelly?
I will move to recommend final passage of R 24-004.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 24-004. Any discussion? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. biggest issue that I have with this, and I really appreciate Mr. Donovan's explanation, but I want to go back to October when we voted on the original resolution that clearly stated in writing that.
You're on the wrong one.
We're not there yet.
Oh, I'm
We're
sorry.
talking on the
I'm
opioid
sorry.
abatement.
I'm gonna park that.
All right,
So
any,
fix that.
any other discussion? No? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Now, R-24-005, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $8,500,000 to fund additional costs for building renovations at the Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable Elementary Schools. I'll make the motion to recommend final passage to the full board. Questions? Alderman Jettie. Excuse me, Tebow.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Alderman Jettie actually did steal a little of my thunder on the, so how old are these schools? Like, what's the date that they were built, you know?
1972.
1972, okay,
They were
good.
both built together.
So younger than me. So my issue with this, and again, Alderman Jettie stole some of my thunder. I mean, these aren't built in 1850. How do we not have record anywhere of double roofs? And you also said that, you know, we found stuff. Well, extra fencing, the gym, I mean, the gym we should have already kind of known about. Fencing is being asked for. The roof, we should have known that there was a second application put on the top. I mean, it's only 50-something years old. So that's the stuff that we should have known ahead of time, and we should have been able to put that in the original ask. It seems like there wasn't a lot of stuff found. There's a few things found, but it's other stuff that should have been known ahead of time. It's different than you digging and all of a sudden you find a lot of asbestos. I get that piece of it. But, you know, like some people have said, I guess we kind of have to do it because, I mean, the school's like in the middle of being done. So, you know, we're probably going to have to do this, but I just, I don't know. I'm concerned about the overruns on things like this and the amount extra we have to spend, because then we have to go back and explain it to our constituents. And I'm sure the constituents that are in these wards where these schools are, I'm sure they're okay, because obviously they're getting benefit out of it. And I know the other schools have all been done, so we can kind of go back towards that and say, hey, well, our school has been done, you know, a few years back. But it just seems like it's cost overruns that we could have, I think, kind of planned for ahead of time, with the exception of a few things that were found in the middle of being done. But again, I'm gonna end up supporting it because I think we kind of have to.
The schools that haven't been touched in recent years, that data wasn't available. It wasn't kept at the office. Now, Mr. Smith keeps the details and drawings of all the work that's done, so we can refer to it. If something comes up, we'll know what happened and when.
And it wasn't even a basic, like, record of,
No.
all right, we did some construction here.
No. So as far as the being built on a ledge, we didn't know that. We didn't know that they poured the concrete over the top of a ledge. And I have pictures of them jackhammering all of that ledge up. That, you know, and as far as the gymnasium, we had kept that as an alternative and hoped to have money at the end of the project. We don't really do that with contingency and reserves, but in this instance, we've expended most of those and we don't have the money to do this. And the other thing is, on this $8.5 million, anything we don't spend won't be bonded. But I refuse to come back again. So I want to make sure that that number is good and that we'll return money in the end. Any other
Thank you.
questions? Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I'll pick up where I left off. Just going back to the original resolution, it clearly stated in writing that we were gonna bond 16 million and we were gonna get 16 million in ESSER funds to complete the project. And I guess the splinter under my fingernail is, you said it in the second slide, we discovered that we didn't have the ESSER funds available. my whole concern with this is not that we need the new roof, not that we're widening the scope of the project, because that's essentially what we're doing. There might be some unknown unknowns, but to me, when I look at it, we're widening the scope of the project. So we need to get some more money. But that four and a half million or 4 million in ESSER funds that we don't have, what happened there? And I understand that there's an email that I really appreciate, but nothing personal, but it sounds like there's mismanagement. I want to know, when did we not know we were getting the 16 million? Because when I voted for it, when everybody voted for it, we said we're getting this from the bond and this from the ESSER funds. And that's what I have the biggest issue with. So all I'd want to know is, when did we find out that we weren't completing, that we were only going to get, we got all the money that we were promised. We just weren't able to use it for this project. When did we know that?
That's a good question, but I'll tell you when the legislation was written. First of all, I think the 16 million was a typo, it should have been 17. But there was some ESSER funds that were being allocated for other elementary schools for some work that Mr. Smith wanted to allocate to this project, and somehow those disappeared. And as I said, it was a complex thing, and as going through the pandemic and they're allocating ESSER funds, it got to the point where you just couldn't find the other 4.5 million in ESSER funds. So it's, as I said, they were very, very complex legislation. There were 3 different buckets of money. Other monies expired and couldn't be used. So it was a complex issue that unfortunately happened. And I guess I look at the glass and say, I'm glad we got in the end, got the 12.5 million. I wish we had the 17 million, but this work has to be done on the schools.
Is it, and I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but the next time a bond resolution comes up and it says we're getting federal funding, should we really drill into that next time? Because there's going to be a next time. And how do we do it? Because in your comment, you said somehow they disappeared. You just said that.
It wasn't that they disappeared. They were used on some other item in the school district.
I understand that, but that's what you just said. You just said somehow they disappeared. And that to me, that's why I get concerned about this. I'm not concerned about the roof. I'm not concerned about the sidewalks. I'm concerned about the missing $4 million that was supposed to be there, and now all of a sudden it's not. Because the other thing that I wanted to talk about was, how else could we pay for this? What's left on it? And we say, okay, what else can we do? Did we sell that whole $16 million bond? Is it all gone now? Is all that money, has that bond been sold and we've used that revenue for this project?
Well, I don't know if the bonds were sold, that's a question for Mr. Griffin, but all of the 16 million's been allocated. Not all the work is completed, we're going to September of 25, so, but it's all been allocated in our budgets. And if you look at the costing sheet for this Birch Hill Main Dunstable that the joint special gets every month, it's been 17 million ESSER funds for a long time. They did change it when the school board decided they only had 12.5 million. It says 12.5 million been allocated, but we didn't know until not that long ago that they weren't coming up with the additional money.
Can I keep going?
Question?
Do we know, since we're more than halfway through the fiscal year, if there's going to be a budget surplus for the school district that might help offset this?
That's a question for the mayor or Mr. Griffin, but I think at this point in time, yes, Mr. Donovan?
Dan Donovan, Chief Operating Officer for the school district. The answer to that question is probably 3 weeks away. Typically, I do forecasts, detailed forecasts for the Board of Education, and the first one is typically shared with them in April. So I do it typically sometime late February, early March.
Okay.
Might there be, so I don't know the answer. 3-4 years ago, there was no money. Since COVID, there has been some money. So,
What was our surplus last year?
last year was, I
fiscal year?
think, like 1.82 million.
The other question I have for Mr., I don't know if you can answer it, Dan, but Mr. Griffin, does it become problematic to spend monies that are left over in a budget on a construction project against a bond? John, you want to answer that?
John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. Following up on Alderman Sullivan's question, we haven't sold any of this bond yet. So the 16 million, we usually sell after the construction is virtually completed. It's a strategy that's been used for decades here in the city. So we have not sold the 16 million for this bond. We haven't sold the 10 million contingency for the middle school project. So one question you could ask and follow up on in the spirit of finding money is, where is that, how is that project going? As far as using savings in operating revenue to pay for things, not a bad idea. I think Alderman Sullivan asked me that question. He wondered, when he determined that the roofs were 2 million, he wondered, could we use assigned fund balance to pay for that? And you certainly can. My thought was, if these buildings are gonna last a significant amount of time, bonding would be the way to go. We have a lot of other needs in the city that we're gonna need funds for, and we've diligently saved and had surplus. The question that you folks asked Mr. Donovan, the 1.8 was primarily due to not being able to hire people. So we actually had savings in healthcare and benefits and so forth, and pension. So these are all the things that at the end of the year we look at, and we grow the unassigned fund balance. We assign, I'm able to assign monies. We have at the end of June, 20,155,000. You folks are gonna be getting some resolutions soon, Friday, where we're gonna recommend we put $5 million into SURF. We didn't do that through the escrow process, so for fiscal '25, we need the $5 million to pay for the trucks and all of that. We're also gonna recommend $4 million to add to the benefits fund, the internal service benefits fund. That fund is, Director Cummings, when he presented his things about a month and a half ago, that needs about $4 million. So what we're doing is we're bringing 20 million down to about 11. There's a few other things there that we need to supplementally appropriate, but not a bad idea to look and use the funds, but as you all know, most of you know, that there's a lot of other needs that if we can bond something that actually is gonna last 25, 30 years, that's probably preferable. But certainly, looking into any kind of savings from other projects, it's worthwhile. I think Mr. Alderman Sullivan asked, because I watched that December 21st, 2023 meeting, and you had noted that there was a couple of $100,000 that we might be able to move over to this, and Alderman Dowd had an answer. But I think as we go forward, these are the last set of schools that we're going to fund. I think there's a few more that are out in the 4 or 5 years from now, but we can look at all of these issues and see where we can kind of piece things together and make the best decision possible. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that information. My question is, because I walked into this, as soon as I saw it, I said, well, I can't, I'm not gonna vote against bonding money that's gonna go to replacing roofs on schools especially. I mean, of course, you need to do that. However, if we pass this, and you noted that we haven't sold the bond for the 16 million, we haven't sold the bond for the 10 million, it's a procedural question in that, can we pass this so we know we have it allocated? However, if we find savings, if there are savings from the schools that we were able to apply to this, are we able to kind of do that even after this has happened? So we can still workshop this where maybe we don't, I'm not saying we don't need the whole 8.5, but we pass the resolution tonight. However, we may not need it if we kind of sharpen the pencil a little bit and say, look, we might be able to get this done another way. Instead of saddling debt, I mean, when I looked at the resolution, that's $600,000 added every year, right, for 20 years to the general
Correct.
fund. So, I mean, that's money. You can't borrow money to pay your teachers, your firemen, your policemen. So that, we're already digging into and adding to the general fund by doing this. So that's why I look for alternative ways to see how we can better manage that. So as we get into it, and everybody is going to be coming in looking for increases in different areas, I just wanted to, that's, I look at the bigger picture.
We need to pass this so that we can allocate the work. We have to have the money set aside to do the work. Any monies that are left over from a job, like we have some money left over from Franklin Street, about 200,000, which isn't a lot, and we're gonna allocate that to the, by the resolution, to the security vestibules for the other two schools. And you can do that. When you get done with a project, if there's money left in the bond, by resolution through the Board of Aldermen, you can allocate it against somewhere else and then not spend that other bond money.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens. And all of that, by the way, goes through the joint special, so you know about it. Holy mackerel. Alderwoman Kelly.
Okay, thank you. I think that this project, obviously, Humane Dunstable and Birch Hill need a lot of support, and I'm not gonna stand in the way of this, but I just don't quite understand the chart that you had in your presentation. I think some of these things you mentioned as unknown unknowns, but then there's like an asterisk that says that it wasn't in the original scope, but now it's brought back, so I'm just, if you could give some clarity to some of the things that are in here, or all of them. Like, for example, it says the roof replacement was in the original, but then deferred because of budget constraints.
We were gonna put a membrane on top of the roof, can't do that. We have
Okay.
to strip the roofs entirely, and this is the extra money it's gonna cost to strip the roofs before we put that roof on.
So the $2 million was in the original because you thought you had to completely
No,
replace it?
we had money set aside to put a new roof, coating on the roof. The $2 million is because now we have to strip both schools. Somebody has to go in there and tear all the existing roofing off, prep it, and then put a new roof on.
I'm not arguing about what the work that needs to be done. Obviously, we need strong schools, good roofs, all of that. But what I'm confused by is that roof replacement in your chart has a star that says it was in the original scope.
We, as you said, we had some money set aside to put a new roof coating on the roofs. We can't do that by code, because when we dove into it, we found out there were already 2 roofs on it. And we can't put a coating on, so we needed the extra money that's in this bond to strip the 2 existing roofs off and so we can then put the roof on.
Could you let me know, what was the original amount for the membrane that was in what was passed? I'm not trying to be dense, I just don't understand.
I have Mr. Arell that will, he's the project manager on the two elementary schools.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Brendan Arell, Harvey Construction Project Manager. So the asterisk that is listed on that sheet, so as Alderman Dowd had noted, during the design, there were areas that were identified as a potential alternative. So some of those items were shown in the design, they were priced by Harvey Construction, and then as we went forward with the GMP approval, those items had to be stripped out because the overall value was, you know, beyond what the project total was. So that asterisk is indicative of any of the items that were identified as an alternate during design. So while those items were priced, they were not identified or, you know, fully vetted out until we got further into the project. So for instance, with the roof, the original approach with it from the records that we had, they indicated that there was a 1972 roof that was on the building. When we got into the building and bored it down, as Alderman Dowd noted, we found two separate roof assemblies there. Tar and gravel roof that was original to the 1970s construction, and then a new, more modern roof that we do not have record of being installed. So there is some potential that that took place as a change down the road, but it was not documented, so we were not aware of that. So the price that we had carried and identified as an alternate, not included in the GMP, but listed with an asterisk on that sheet, was much less than the overall price that we had identified for the roof after boring it and figuring out what the full extent of the roof assembly was.
So we're not seeing the full, okay, that helps, thank you.
Absolutely.
If I could follow up.
Yep.
Yep. Yes.
For you too. So the other question I have is just, there's like things that are in white, is there a difference in what is the white
Do you mind
in
if
the
I?
chart? Sorry.
Yeah.
We can put it up here.
It's been a while since I've
Just
looked
like-
at it, but. So essentially, so everything that's listed in black here has, in all of the items that are listed with an asterisk. So for instance, the first couple, if we go through like the basketball hoops, the refinishing the gym floors, so those items at the time of design were identified as a potential item that we may be able to do if the project budget could support that. So we priced it out as we were going forward with the design on the project, and as we identified that the overall budget could not support that work, it was identified with an asterisk and pulled out as one of 5 separate alternates. So there was alternate 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And 5 was actually a list of several items that were all deferred scopes during the pricing. So basically, any items listed here in white are essentially unknown unknowns, or items that we ran into. Any items that are listed in black with an asterisk were things that we attempted to price and attempted to evaluate as we went through the design, and then uncovered further unknowns as we got into the building, much like the ledge underneath, as well as the double roof assemblies that had no record of being completed.
If I get one more follow-up.
Yeah, the other thing, by the way, there's a sign at Birch Hill being replaced. They had to tear down the school sign because to get the temporary, the portable trailers in place, the crane had to go across that meridian, and they had to tear the sign down, so they need a new sign.
That was my follow-up question. I was like, why do we need
I
a new sign?
anticipated.
Yep,
I appreciate this. I mean, I just had construction done in my house. I understand that things
absolutely.
change, but I was just trying to make sense of the chart. And I think we should do the work right now
And
while we're there.
I
Make
think
sure
the
that
guys
we
from
get
Harvey
in
can
place.
tell you that if something comes up that they wanna spend money on that we don't feel, Sean and I don't feel is worth it, we don't approve it.
Oh, I
That-
wasn't,
that
I
is
wasn't
certainly true.
suggesting that. The
Like
chart was
today.
just, there wasn't a whole lot of information around the chart, and it was confusing without that explanation, so thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. Alderman Debo? I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question, it goes back to something Alderman Sullivan had said, and something you had said, Mr. Chair, about, so if I'm looking at this from a citizen, and I'm looking at this from, you know, if I was a reporter, or if I was a citizen that was concerned about money, when we said, like, yeah, we don't know where that ESSER money went, we should probably know where the ESSER money went, like either from Mr. Donovan, or from Mr. Griffin, or from us. Because if someone came up to me and asked me that question, like, oh, I heard you guys at the meeting and you said that ESSER money was, you know, went somewhere else, but we don't know where. Somebody must know where, I mean, so it's important to me to know kind of where it went, and is it this email here, and this is very specific, or is it something else, maybe someone?
Mr. Donovan?
Dan Donovan, Chief Operating Officer for the school district. The money was spent on other things within the school. I will put together a list. We had 3 ESSER funds. It was $48 million. To be honest with you, the way the federal government went about this, it was overwhelming. It was not only overwhelming to the school districts, especially us in Manchester, received millions and millions of dollars. It was overwhelming to the state because they had a hard time, okay, what can you spend it on? Yes, you can spend it on this. No, you can't spend it on that. The construction piece of it, they originally said, yes, you can use it for HVAC systems. But, by the way, most things you put in a grant, you write up a small narrative, you put it in the grant management system, someone at the state approves it. For construction, we were required to put a number of documents together with, working with Mr. Smith, we did that. So for each one of the construction projects, they didn't get approved until after that bond was, so the 16 million was there, they didn't get the project wasn't officially approved until later on, until I think March of '23. So, but one of the things that changed was when they said you have to spend 30% of the 29 million on learning loss and those sorts of things. So that would be teachers and curriculum and programs and all that, which we were spending some of the money on anyway. But if we didn't spend any money on construction, we wouldn't have been able to spend it all in the time allotted. So they threw all this money at you, they limited to what you could spend it on, and they limited the amount of time you could spend it. So I said, we need to spend some of this on construction, or we're not gonna be able to spend it all. Unless we're gonna bring in hundreds of teachers that you couldn't find, and then turn around and get rid of them. And the other thing that affected this amount was the money, the other construction project, which was the Franklin Street HVAC. That was another $6 million. So if you think about it, we did use over $18 million on construction that we didn't have to use bonds for. So that's the good part of it. But we had initially planned on taking $3 million of the $6 million for the Franklin Street HVAC and put it into ESSER 2, and the rest of it into ESSER 3. The state said, no, you need to put them all in one place. We couldn't afford to put all $6 million in ESSER 2 because it only had a year left, and most of it was spent or allocated. So then we had to put that into 3. Once we put that into 3, between the 30% number and just the other items, that's kind of what caught us. And that all sort of happened within a 4 to 6 month period. So it wasn't smooth, it was rocky. We were living and learning.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, obviously, you know, we got an email on it, and a lot of the stuff you'd said is in the email. But, you know, emails are great, but they come to us here. And so the problem with that is they don't, you know, we're not blasting this email to 90,000 people in the city, right? So, you know, we all knew about it, you know, we know what's in this email, and, you know, sometimes it's not easy to read into what exactly happened just in words, is not, you know, not being able to ask questions. So, I appreciate that explanation, because it's important that, you know, when we say stuff like, we don't know where that money went, well, we're gonna get killed for that. People are gonna be like, well, Nashua is losing money somewhere, or they're taking money and putting it somewhere else. So it's important that we account for all that stuff. And the only way to do that is to get the record out. And in a record like this, in this forum, we can ask those questions. I think, You know, we got the Nashua Ink Link is now out, and they're reporting on what we talked about in these meetings. So I think when we make comments like, you know, that money just went somewhere and we don't know where, we gotta make sure we know where it is. So thank you for that
So
explanation.
we know where
I
it all
appreciate
went. I know where it all went.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
they had control of it, the joint special didn't have control over it. And that email and the presentation that we gave are going to be in the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Senate, did you have a follow-up? or-
Mr. Donovan just actually answered most of my questions. I've been trying to wrap my head around this just for my own edification with the ESSER, and I know a lot of the funding that came out of COVID and the pandemic is very complex. I had to deal with some of that myself. Maybe just a couple of clarifying questions, just so I'm sure that I'm understanding things properly. Each of these three ESSER grants that we referred to, these each had their own unique timeframes that we were required to spend the money within, is that correct?
Correct. Some overlapped. ESSER 2 and 3 overlapped. ESSER 2 finished last October. ESSER 3 will finish this October. And then there was ESSER 1, which was about $3 million, that finished a couple of years ago.
Okay. And you would, sorry, follow up?
Go ahead.
Yep.
Follow-up.
You had mentioned in your email and briefly just a moment ago that when we were looking at the HVAC for Franklin Street, we were told by the state, no, that couldn't be done during, with ESSER 2, that had to be ESSER 3. Was that like a written mandate that the state offered in terms of this grant can be used for this, but this grant can only be used for this? Is there any
No,
teeth to that, or?
There was, no, it was a suggestion made to our grant person at the time to include that activity, so that construction project at Franklin was one activity. Keep that in the same ESSER grant.
Okay.
So that's what, because I could go back and show you a piece of paper where it said 3 million here, 2.5, the original was, about 6 million for that when we first started estimating it. Because we had to get these papers into the state, go through this whole process before we even had the architects and engineers look at anything. So, and this was odd because of the timing of this. We're not gonna get this kind of money again. I mean, to be honest, I certainly hope the federal government doesn't throw out that much money again. So we're not gonna get it. This was a once off. And I think even if there was some money put out for school construction, let's say, because I guess that's a possibility, then there would be more structure around how you would do it. We and many other people in the state that used these funds for construction, we had to follow Davis-Bacon wages, which, up in the North Country, they don't follow that. They can't even find people to pay that much. And so there were a lot of little federal government guidelines around this money that made it difficult to navigate through the process.
Well, thank you for taking the time to explain that. I really appreciate it.
Any other questions, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Donovan, while we have you. Sure. So I'm going to say it's the 4th paragraph, maybe. You went into how ESSER had a guideline that 30% of the grant should be used for learning loss and other specific student activities. Then 30% of that is 29 million. What I'm trying to get at is what's left of the ESSER funds. And there is a phrase that you say, leaving only $1.8,421 available for potential increase to construction projects. You're not saying, or are you saying, that there's 1.8 million and change left of ESSER funds for construction projects?
No, it's not left. What that statement was saying, the most we could have possibly put from ESSER 3 into construction if we didn't use anything other than the 30% for those items, that would have been. So we spent 18.5 million. If we decided to drop all the teachers, drop all the curriculum, drop all the programs that we put in place with ESSER 2, many of them moved into ESSER 3.
Yeah.
If we didn't do that, the most we could have spent on construction was the 18.5 that we did spend and that 1.8.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Alderman Kelly?
Yes, so just going back to the way that this has been priced out, are we pretty confident in the prices? The reason I ask is because that only leaves, if I did the math right, about $250,000 in contingency, if we approve an $8.5 million bond.
I am 100% confident in the pricing I get from Harvey and have been in all of our projects.
Okay.
They make sure that it's solid. Yes, Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the only concern I have is, I heard at one point, it was commented that the gymnasium was part of the contingency. Now it's being pulled out of contingency, made part of the project. And I understood you put into the contingency because you felt you'd have enough money left over to cover it. But now you're actually just pulling it and putting it right into the project. That's part of this.
Originally, we thought we might have the funds to do it, and we don't. So
So-
if we don't get this bond, the gym's gonna be, the classrooms will be taken out, and it'll be left in decent shape, but not like it should be.
Yeah, I guess there's a selfish part of me in all of this, as I listen to this additional, and I heard, there won't be any more projects for 4 to 5 years, and, I'm sitting with a school, Mount Pleasant, there, and I'm very concerned that we're going to be putting in, these extra contingencies. Don't get me wrong, I think fences are needed, there's no doubt in my mind that this roof is needed, and I don't want to, pick and choose and say, okay, this $187,000 can't be spent for this, and so on. But I have to agree with my colleague from Ward 9 is, could we find this money somewhere else rather than just saying, let's throw a bond together and do this? I mean, I know the writing is on the wall that the plan is to close Mount Pleasant, but the issue that I'm seeing here is that suddenly we had to come up with $6 million for Franklin Street School, and now suddenly we have to come up with $8.5 million for this school. And there are other schools in the system that are not gonna get anything done, and does this gymnasium really have to be done? I just see a contingency item going into the actual project, where right from the beginning, it was a contingency item, meaning that if you had money left over, you would do it. Now it's not if you have money left over, you're just gonna do it. I'm just making that point.
First of all, it's 2 gyms, and these gyms aren't used, they're used every day by the school, every single day.
Mhm.
And remember, when we make classrooms in there, we're nailing into the wood, so there's only limited thing we can do, and we tear all those classrooms out. Every other school we've ever done in the last 18 years that I've been involved, we have refurbished the gymnasium, because it's not only used every day by the school, it's used by all the other athletic, especially biddy basketball. And they're suffering right now because they're 2 gyms short. And it's only fair, because these aren't gonna be touched again. And if they were to be touched, you'd be doing another bond later on, and trust me, it would be a lot more expensive later than it is now.
May I finish?
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I'm not, I shouldn't say so much that I'm begrudging the gym being fixed. Obviously, it has to be fixed, but we knew from day one we were gonna be drilling into that floor. So the point I guess I'm trying to make is, the gym has never really been a contingency. We just put in paper as contingency. We knew from day one that we were going to have to fix this. So that's the only point I'm trying to make, is it really was never a contingency. Even though we put into the contingency, it wasn't that we hoped there would be money, we really felt there was gonna be money to be done. I think it should have been in the original scope. I think the Alderman from Ward 9 kinda made some type of reference that we were, kind of doing, increasing our scope, but I don't think we really were. I think this was part of the original scope.
It was
That's just
part-
the point I'm trying to
It
make.
was part of the original scope, and that's why, then when we we only had X amount of dollars, we had to take things out and put them in contingency, and that was one of them. It was originally planned to be refurbished, and we thought we'd probably have money left at the end. We don't. So unless we pass this bond, that gym's gonna be not in the shape it should be.
May I think we're just playing semantics here. You're right, from the beginning, we knew we had to do it. You said we didn't have any money in the beginning, so we threw it into contingency, but still, from day one, we knew this had to be done, so we just put it there as a placeholder, knowing that we were going to do it. So for the public to be hearing, this isn't contingency. It was really from day one. It was it's not a scope creep because we planned on doing it, and that's the point I'm trying to make. And I understand what you're saying. It has to be done, but we're playing games with words, so thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing no further questions, motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 24005 to the full board. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled in committee, none. General discussion? Alderman Sullivan.
I had a question as we were getting ready for this about the timing of it, and I know that our regular budget meetings, I believe, are the fourth Monday of every month, and I was just curious why we put this meeting on the calendar. I understand we needed a public hearing, but were there timing implications? Because we're not selling the bond anytime soon.
Yes, there are implications. We have to get the roofing contractors and a couple of other contracts that are part of this under contract, and they will be coming as PCOs at the next joint special meeting, which will be right after this will go to the full board on the 13th, and the joint special is at the end of the month, and these will be put out to the joint special for PCO action, and if approved, then the contractors will be hired to start planning the work. As soon as this white stuff stops falling, they'll be on the roof.
I also would consider, since I'm also on the Joint Special School Building Committee, perhaps an upcoming meeting might be to strictly go over finances, kind of a progress bar of what we've spent, what we have left, what we still have left to do, just really clear, concise. Perhaps one meeting we bypass pictures and presentations of where we are, but maybe just fully dedicated to the financial.
So when we do the invoices and you get that agenda, the entire financial picture for each one of the projects is on there. What is going to be spent, what's been spent, and what the balance is.
I know that,
So,
but it doesn't get out there to be discussed. It's there, I look at it every meeting. But what I'm saying is, can we get it out on the record, talk about it, where we are, concerns, progress, all of that. I'm just asking for your consideration.
all right.
You can do it if you want, you don't have to. Just throwing that out there.
I'll see what we can do. I'll talk to Mr. Smith. Any other general comments? No. No public comment? Remarks by Alderman, Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before this meeting, I was over at the library. They had the event tonight for new people coming to Nashua, where some of the city departments were there, Transit, Parks and Rec, Health and Human Services. Unfortunately, the mayor wasn't able to attend tonight, but it was a good event, and it was good to talk to a few of the new residents in the city, and their big concern, of course, was housing. There were some people that want to move here and just need housing to find something that's fairly affordable. So it was good to introduce these departments to some of our newer citizens and some people that want to come there. So I just want to thank all the city departments that were able to be there. Director Hannum was there as well, and she spoke. And I thought that was a really nice event. So I just wanted to thank them on the record. Thank you.
I just have one heads up. There will be one more school bond coming. It's something 2 million or less. It's the added money for the security vestibules because of the scope of the project. We are gonna transfer the money from Franklin Street via legislation to the security vestibules, so that'll reduce the amount we need. and I talked to Mr. Griffin, we'll allocate that bond for the security vestibules, but we're pretty sure that that money can be transferred at the end of the McCarthy project, or middle school project. So that bond probably will never be spent, but we have to do that. We have to allocate the money to do the work. We already have a 2 million for the security vestibules. This will be an additional up to 2 million. I don't know exactly what the number is yet, but just as a heads up, and that's the last school construction that I know about for some time. We have to focus on fire stations and library and a number of other things. So, all right, Alderman Wiltshire.
Motion to adjourn?
Good motion. Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:25.
I think we're going to the wrong place.